Vincent, and thank you for enjoying Make Me Famous.
Thank you.
I'm the director.
Sorry?
Somebody in the dorms?
Oh, well, Andrew's welcome to join us, but we can actually.
We're a little short-handed at the moment.
that's
so,
fine.
Oh, well,
Well,
you'll jump in.
we can have conversations, just the four of us, we do it all the time. But this is Frank Holliday from the movie, the painter Frank Holliday. And collector Lenny Kisko.
And here today we have one of our photographers. We have a few photographers who really opened up their archives today. I mean, in the film, and they're up top. And one of us is Joseph Astor. Can you just wait?
Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you.
The film was really visually told from the people who knew Brzezinski. I wanted to use the artwork and the photographs and original artwork from the people who knew and loved Edward the most. So that's it's always great to have a photographer here, but we also used many photographers. But there was one videographer whose video you mostly see here. And we were lucky to stumble upon that.
And that was Jim C.
Yes.
And we're just so thankful. We started this whole project without that video. We were two actors. This was our very first film. We thought we were just inspired by what the artists were doing in the East Village, and we just kind of jumped in head first. And when you make a documentary, just FYI, if anybody wants to, find your video first. So we were very lucky that popped up in the process.
It was actually Lenny who inspired me to make the movie. I'm an actor, as Heather said. She was on Broadway for years in Wicked, and I'm obviously an actor with a lot of free time on my hands.
Well, you went to Juilliard.
You're making movies.
Anyway, yeah, I was learning to make movies because I want to make movies, and I got enthralled with reading about the Lower East Side in a book Cynthia Carr wrote called Fire in the Belly. And I just got a fire in the belly from that, and I had to know more. And so I started to go out and meet some of the artists and things like that. And but before that, I was working with Lenny on a waiter job, and he found out that I was inspired by the 80s, and he said, well, you should come over to my apartment and see this paintings. I collected someone all through the 80s, and when I got there, it was also a walk-up apartment. Lenny has this railroad apartment, and every surface of it is a Brzezinski. And the way that he talked about Edward, as well as the power of the paintings, but it was also how much he loved Edward, and it made me wonder, how come this guy didn't get famous? What's his story? And I could kind of relate to that because, as an actor, you're always getting famous gets you more work. If you're not famous, you're always auditioning. So then we investigated this story, and Lenny had all these things that Brzezinski had left for Lenny, in the hopes that one time that Lenny was going to be his manager, even, I think. And so I took his resume, and that's when the investigation with Heather and I began.
Mm-hmm.
And then we met people like Frank Holliday. Now, Frank, how does this movie strike you? Is this the authentic 80s that you see up here?
Yeah. I mean, it was mean and hard and harsh and cruel and exciting and like a phenomenon because it wasn't planned. It just kind of happened. And I mean, like culture, it kind of, you can't plan it. It kind of like, there's spots, like it happened in the East Village, and then it happened in Seattle for Cobain, and then it happened in London, and so it's like weird how like these energies of creativity kind of form, and then something's born out of them. So, but I think that New York, and I'm sure a lot of you were here, was not a real nice place. It was rough and hardcore. I mean, it was a hardcore city, and we were living in Lower East Side and the East Village for like $10 an hour.
Well,
I mean, $10
$10
an hour.
for the rent, right?
Depends on the
$10 for
day,
rent.
right, Frank?
And they were being so creative, and part of what made me so excited about that was that they just got together and performed for each other. They didn't need money to do it. You know, now there's these artists, and you know, they start with money, and they go backwards. If you don't have money, it makes it harder to put your things out there.
We like money.
But then again,
Money. I mean,
well,
come on.
yeah.
We'll be selling stuff outside. Stencil T-shirts.
But Lenny, so now that you're seeing Brzezinski get a little bit more attention than he had before, how does that feel?
It's very strange because you don't know why people are approaching you or what they want to know. I can imagine what it was like for the Basquiat family or something to only have Jean-Michel for 27 years, and then all of a sudden the whole world wants to know every detail and every nuance and every piece of forged work and every piece of information dissected about a person who was only 27 years old. So Edward died in his 50s, and we lost contact with him like many people at that time. But his brilliance stood through when I first saw him, like that wow factor. And I just went with it with that.
Won't it be
Maybe
something when there are forged Edward Brzezinski's?
there are what?
Won't it be something?
Well, we'll wait and see. I have to authenticate them. But, you know, when he had the Magic Gallery, even when he showed other artists, he was showing female artists, he was showing disenfranchised artists, artists that couldn't get a break. But he would say, well, put it up on my wall and we'll invite people and then just see what happens without fear. So to me, that was a strength that he had also.
Well, also what I find interesting is like East Village artists at a certain point were like 10 million and they all were making the same art, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Edward, you know, I mean, Edward was good. I mean, Edward was a really good artist, but I think they look really good now, which is very interesting that 30 years later, they really hold some kind of an importance, and I think you guys, with your filmmaking, made a case for Edward.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thank you for that.
There's actually a show up right now, if you're interested in this kind of artwork and you want to delve into it deeper, on 1 Rivington Street, there's like a pop-up show that is, it's like in accordance with this wonderful show at the Bronx Museum.
Daryl
for
Ellis,
an artist named
Regeneration.
Daryl Ellis.
Go see it. It's
It's
quite
really nice.
brilliant.
But there's Edward's painting in the film of himself, his self-portrait is hanging there. And then there's art from a lot of the people that you see in the film, or hear about in the film, and photographs from some of our photographers as well.
And my Polaroids, which I used to shoot in all the nightclubs and everything, thinking I was an artist at that time. And now they're in a gallery, so
Yeah.
they can have them.
And there's a clip from our movie in the show as well, which is a new one for us. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask?
Oh, the gallery's Canvas Midday Gallery,
Okay.
MADEY. It's on 1 Rivington, and the show goes till August 7th.
Yes. Does anybody have a question? Oh, yes.
Did you ever run across in your research Brian Goodfellow?
Well, yes, we did.
Yes, Brian Goodfellow would have been a key element in this movie had he been alive. I really desperately wanted to interview him. He was his best friend. He was a Ford model, and he was a painter. James Romber said we should paint it alive. There was a lot of stuff, and he was also in a historic Club 57 show. But one of the elements of when you're making a movie or whatever you're investigating things, if you can't get to them, then his story was very hard to tell. The archival becomes really important because you get to live in the archival. And if he's there in the archival, then you get to see him. But he had passed away before I could get to him. By 2016, he died, I think it was. Could have been 15.
I have a Brian
16.
Goodfellow that was given to me when he moved out of an apartment next door with Scott Covert. And Scott Covert also gave me 2 pieces, which I have framed, which curators are now looking at also. But they just gave it away. And the Brian Goodfellow piece is a drawing that he did. And I've had it pressed for like 40 years. And I looked at it just the other day, you mentioned it, and it looks like something right out of the future. It was like he was doing this type of characters that were very futuristic. And I was like, whoa, this is...
I think it's a really interesting thing though, because also a few of the people in the film have passed away since too as well. Of course, you saw that Richard Hamilton passed away, but Marcus Leatherdale, who's just a fantastic human being and photographer, and Duncan Hanna have since passed. So this art history we were able to get, but so if we could have reached him, he would have been in it. Is there another question? Oh yes.
Yeah, along the lines of Brian Goodfellow, I knew him very well, and also he gave me several of his paintings.
Yeah.
He didn't, it's like he didn't see them as having any work, it seems like that, and he just distributed them for nothing. And then I think you put me in contact with his widow in Croatia?
Yes.
In Croatia. She wants to do, I guess I'm saying this for the benefit of those who have Brian Goodfellow pieces, she wants to do a book, a sort of commemorative book, so I promised her I would try to find things and not some of the pictures, but give her whatever she needed her to.
Yeah, he was
Pictures of them,
gifted.
so I think maybe they'll have a way to sort of survive, all the chaos that was his.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
He's in the archive. Did you see him in
Yeah.
the?
Yeah.
He
Yes.
acts in the movie in the archive of the famous film that Eric directed. So he's the one that says, I don't think anyone would wear that or whatever it was. But, yeah, he's a fascinating character, and the thing is, when you investigate and you meet all these incredible, fantastic things, and you say, well, how do you put all this together? And what we came up with was that Edward's obituary basically tells his story, and it's very simple and small, but it matches with the archival. And eventually we question the validity of the obituary itself. So the backbone of the movie is really the obituary.
Do we have time, Gary, for a few more questions?
I actually thought that was a very clever device, using the obituary, because the film is staccatic and disjointed, I think by design, which works. I actually think it works. But we've got that obituary coming through. I must compliment you guys on doing that. It's an excellent device. And the film is very touching, extremely touching. I have to compliment all of you. I was a little dubious about coming today, but I'm really delighted that I came because I think it's extremely informative, very touching, and it's a kind of love letter. And I bet the producer, you must have thought of it as a love letter. And the last scene where the 2 friends of his go with you to France, difficult trip, and then you end up with, you actually find his grave, commending all the way, really.
Thank you.
It deserves to be reviewed in the New York Times.
Yes, as anyone know a writer at the New York Times.
New York Times, okay. Oh, you're from the Times?
Oh,
No,
no,
I'm just
I'm
kidding.
not, but this will actually turn his Wikipedia page into a blue link. This is gonna be the thing. His Wikipedia page has nothing.
Yes.
Oh, Edwards,
Yeah,
yes. Edward himself has no wiki.
Correct.
But yes, by design, because I had been so enthralled with the Lower East Side, I wanted to find a character that whose career mirrored the rise and fall of the Lower East Side. So the fact that Edward had all of the archival, the genius to film himself, because back then you had to have big camera on your back. I mean, it wasn't like now with video cameras. But that was just pure luck. And but anyway, yeah. So maybe he's gonna get his own wiki now. I hope so.
Yes. Well, to your point about the love letter, I was on Broadway for 13 years in an ensemble position, of understudy for Glinda in Wicked, one of the biggest shows. And I showed up every day, and I gave 150% every show because I knew that the people coming to see the show were paying a lot of money. And I felt a real responsibility there to tell a story and to bring them out of their reality into this world. And I think, a lot of people are very talented and talented enough to be on Broadway. And it always kind of, it's this interesting thought, like, why do people make it? What is the magic sauce in the moment that you can get that? And if you never make it, I have friends of mine that are so incredibly talented, and they may never be on Broadway. But they're showing up every day too, and creating art and rehearsing and putting together one-man shows and begging people to come, and it's just a very interesting thought for us. I think that was one of the things that meant something to us in this film, because you just never know who's going to make it, and I think there's honor in just doing your art, whether or not you make it famous, and I think that's one of the reasons that we kept going with this.
Yeah, the movie's intended to bring forward people who were invisible to the scene in history, and bring them to the fore, and the famous people sort of in the back.
It appears that he was fairly prolific. I mean, do you know where his paintings are?
They're with Lenny.
I got as many as I bought from him, or when he would call my answering service and leave 12 messages, and they would get angry, and they would get, who's this artist guy? Keep calling us. Could you tell him just to leave one message? And he was very, very passionate about what he did. Every minute of the day was towards painting. He never talked. He talked about other things sometimes, but it always came back to painting. Why? Can you sell me? Why don't you sell for me? Why don't you become an art dealer? Why don't you? I was like, I'm uptown dancing. I don't have time to do your art career for you. So, it was all like, and then 40 years later, all of a sudden, there must be a reason, right?
But it's very interesting because we have a very dedicated social media audience on Instagram and Facebook. And every once in a while we'll get like a DM, hey, I have this painting that I found on the street, on the corner, and I pulled it into my house, and I just got around to Googling the artist, and you have a documentary about him. And so we met a guy in France that met him while he was painting on the street, near the beach. And so it's been, social media, you love it or you hate it, mostly we hate it. But in this case, it's really connected us to people all over the country and the world, actually, the artists and whatnot. And in that, please, if you want to help an independent filmmaker, follow them on social media and engage with our content in this most precious time, because we do have some gatekeepers that are tracking us, and we want to just do as well as we can. And if you feel so inclined, if you want to, hop onto IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes and give us a rating or a review, that engagement is helpful as well. We're 100% on Rotten Tomatoes right now, so we'll see how that one lasts. But
Does anyone else have another question? Oh, cool. Okay, well, Frank, I just want to ask you one question. How are things going with your art right now, how do you think Edward would have been doing right now too, if you were here with us?
My art is still happening.
Guggenheim Fellowship, at least.
But the only reason why I'm alive is because, and I'm going to break my anonymity. I got sober in 1990, and I've been sober since then. And I had to learn how to survive. I've done pretty good off my work. I'm not Jean-Michel Basquiat, but I'm still alive. There's something to say for still being alive. But I do want to say something, that the last time I saw Edward, I was leaving an AA meeting, and he was walking into one. So he did try to get it together, and he did try to get it. he tried to get sober, and Edward, I think that if he had gotten sober, I think that he would be doing just fine. Because I think that Edward was not a nice drug. Neither was I, and that kind of held him back in the career aspect of, when you tell everybody that's trying to help you to fuck themselves, it's like, okay, fuck yourself, fuck you, So I think Edward would have been great if he could have just done that.
Well, it's your dedication to painting that and all of the art that you all did that made this movie. So.
And thank you for supporting us by coming out.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
supporting
for
the
coming.
theater that does support the